104.7 The Cave, Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens in the studio. It is Dark Side of the Stream, episode 163, while Jay mutes his phone.
Well, sometimes
This week was Jay's pick on our 163rd. No, actually, this was my pick, 163. Was it?
No, this was mine.
Was this yours?
I went with
I've lost track of
boy band. I went with boy band.
Oh, yes. Okay. So anyway, this was Jay's pick, something that he has actually brought up a few times that we do, and I was like, I don't know, I want to do it, but eventually it became a point where we had to do it, and we're talking about the documentary on HBO Max that's called Menudo, Forever Young.
Now I gotta say right out the gate, I screwed myself on this one because half of it's in Spanish and I didn't have any subtitles.
So Jay, it's so funny that like Jay picked this one because I knew out of the gate that there would be some Spanish speaking. This was probably, if you could equate a band to how big these guys were in Latin America at the time, I would say they were like the Beatles.
I didn't know they were that big either.
Oh,
and I was alive during this era.
Massive, but you're not from Latin America. So I mean, while they did make it into they did cross over outside of Latin America. It wasn't like that big, but in Latin America, more specifically like Puerto Rico, they were like the Beatles.
Dude.
Huge.
Wow.
Huge band. But when you said that, I was like, man, this is funny because Jay always is like, oh man, how am I supposed to like play poker and watch this if I gotta read the subtitles?
Got subtitles, it's tough for me. This one I couldn't, there was no subtitles. So a half of it, they were speaking Spanish. So I was just watching. So yeah, this was a tough one.
Have been brushing up on my Spanish, so much so that when I went to Chicago a couple weeks ago, I actually helped this young Mexican woman and her little kid order food at a restaurant because she couldn't speak any English.
Nice.
It was funny because like we had been drinking, we were kicking off our vacation and stuff, and we're in this restaurant, and I hear her say basically to the tune of like, can I get this grilled and can we have no spice on it? It's from my daughter. And I was sitting there and in my inebriated state, I look over because I was like, oh my God, I understood that. And like,
wow.
So when I did that, the waitress is standing there and she's like, doesn't have any clue what she's saying. And then the woman looks at me and I had this like, I guess, look of like, I know what she said. And then I go like quickly look back to Krista and Krista's like, don't get involved.
You had to.
She's like,
don't get involved.
Don't get involved. And I was like, I know. And we sat there, and then they kept trying, and then the woman kept looking at me, and I kept going, Krista, she's looking at me, dude. And then she's like, no. And then the waitress starts looking at me, and I was like, no, the waitress is looking at me, and she goes, fine, just go over there. And so I went over there, and I said basically like, hey, look, she wants the chicken grilled, no spices on it because it's for her daughter. They're going to share it, and they want mozzarella sticks. It was not a big deal. But again,
you're a regular Rosetta Stone.
So that's why I liked it, because it helps me brush up on the things that I'm trying to relearn. I don't know. It's just like I wanted to give my brain an exercise. But yes, it was definitely something that you had to be paying attention to. I still think it's funny that you don't use subtitles because it's in English.
I wanted subtitles. Usually they're there. They weren't there.
I'm talking about just like in general, you're not a big subtitle guy. I keep the subtitles on everything.
Oh, I hate that. That's what my kid tries to do every time.
That's because it's easier. It's easier for me to see it and hear it at the same time.
Takes away from the suck-in factor. I like to be sucked into these things.
I'm not even going to repeat that. I don't want to ever hear you say it takes away from the suck-in factor. You've entered the suck-in factor. Maybe that should be a new segment of this. The suck-in factor. I don't think we spent any time talking about this documentary, but we'll do that next. This Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio, Dark Side of the Stream, discussing Menudo, Forever Young on HBO Max. Now, this documentary talks about the very iconic band Menudo, which, like a lot of other boy bands during this period, was put together by a dude.
Producer, right?
Yeah, his name was Eduardo Diaz, and they did not have a lot of nice things to say about this guy.
No. Well, this guy had a slick hustle. He just, if they get a little too old, hit puberty, he just puts a new one in.
Well, and that's exactly what happened to these guys in this band. They were replaceable, but at the end of the day, the star power wasn't the same after they were replaced. I mean, there was the core Menudo, and then it would continue on after that. But yeah, this dude was kind of I guess
he's like the same, like the Ron Perlman guy from NSYNC and Backstreet Boys and all that stuff.
Yeah. You know? And it's crazy that this dude that really up until this point, he was kind of in and out as a producer, didn't really have a whole lot of like ground to stand on. And then all of a sudden he puts this band together and it's like, boom, they hit. Now there's a lot of allegations of abuse that it's really, really tough to swallow in this. Because there are a lot of incidences where these kids were basically propped up and sexualized and exposed to predators who did some not so great things to them. And they've been dealing with that for their entire life.
Yeah.
The other crazy thing about this is we hear about them doing this in the United States with girl bands, young artists, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, where they're teenagers, but they're sexualized. And it's not a good look. We're really a good look when I was a kid. It's definitely not a good look now, but you don't hear this happening about boy bands too often.
Yeah. They like NSYNC, O-Town, Backstreet Boys, you know, you don't, because they're boys, I guess, right? Is that why they don't talk about it as much?
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe in some circumstances where the guys, you know, are young, late teens, early 20s, where it's kind of like,
but those guys were getting more kind of ripped off on the money. And I think Menudo, there was actually some touching going on, like, you know,
you get the idea that
Ricky Martin has said stuff like that.
Yeah, and Ricky and Robbie actually are not part of this as being interviewed currently, but they have been in the press about talking
That's
about
why they didn't want to talk to them. They didn't want to talk to them, you know.
Yeah,
because they knew that they'd say, "Hey, man, some shady stuff was going down to us."
Yes, and it's not a good look at all. And again, this isn't a case where it's like I was a big fan of Menudo and now I can't listen to him anymore because all these things are going on. Sorry guys, but it's not my jam. It's not to say that I don't like Latin music at all. I do. There's a ton of bands that I love from down south, but
I was amazed at how popular they were. I couldn't believe, like you said, like the Beatles.
Especially in Latin America.
Right down there.
Yeah, big time. I mean, they were big, and obviously Ricky Martin would go solo. And
they came to America, and they were there. I mean, I remember they were super popular, you know, but
we moved down further down south. But we'll get to more about this crazy story about Menudo next. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave. Jay Stevens, Mike the Intern, back in the studio, Dark Side of the Stream, discussing Menudo Forever Young on HBO Max. Now, obviously, the allegations that the band members bring up as far as members bullying each other, some inappropriate touching going on, basically getting thrown to the wolves by predators, over-sexualizing these kids. It's not a good look at all. But what stood out to me more than anything else in this documentary, at least knowing the story now, because I didn't know anything about it until after I watched this. Their parents signed over their rights to this man, as then once they joined the band, he was now their parental guardian.
That's crazy.
I don't even have, like, you know how they say everything has a price, right? Like, how much does it cost for you to do this? How much?
Yeah.
There is no amount of money that you could give me to give up parental rights at all. None.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's not for sale.
Now,
that's like I would die for. You know what I mean?
Is it because of just like the extreme poverty down there?
Probably.
You know?
I mean, again, it's all in the sell. Like if the guy came to them and was like, look, it's just a legality thing. We got to do this so we can do it. That's probably how it was sold.
I've got to be able to take them with me and not have problems.
And if we go to other countries, and if we get a question, there are minors. I don't want to get in trouble transporting minor, blah, 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 blah. Maybe they have to do it, but they don't, because if I was the parent, I'd say, if you want them bad enough, then I'll go with you. Or my wife's going with you.
Yeah.
Either way, we're going to have a family member there to make sure everything's on the up and up.
Yeah.
That was where that stopped. And that's how all this abuse was able to happen after the fact. Because once he had that signature on the line, it's like, well, you can't come. I just, that blew, I mean, all the other stuff, I don't want to say like you expect it to happen, but it's an unfortunate nature of the business, especially at this time in our history, that stuff like this was rampant. It's still rampant. It's just a lot more secretive and people aren't talking about it. It still, I'm sure, happens all the time. Both sexes.
It's a little more openly frowned upon.
Yeah. It's, as a society, we're like, hey, wait a minute. That's not a joke. We're not messing with that stuff. But yeah, at the time, this wasn't crazy. But I don't think the times have changed that much where parents would be willing to sign over their rights so their kids can join a hypothetical boy band that might make it or not.
I mean, maybe down south, like I was recently down in Mexico and you just see it, these kids on the street trying to sell you little trinkets and stuff like that. Maybe, some of these parents would for the money, if they said, hey, we'll get to have a better life. I don't know. I mean, I couldn't do it, but I'm just saying I can see how they could
in a certain circumstance,
how they could get finagled to doing that.
Yeah. And again, this is kind of one of those things where I think a lot of people just had their own idea of what Menudo was. And this was kind of a, hey, guess what? It wasn't all bubble gum. This is everything else that happened, and in certain circumstances, you can see where labels are going above and beyond to protect their brand, Michael Jackson, where they don't want anything bad said about it, because it's not the Jackson family that's trying to stop that. It's the ownership of that label that's trying to protect their brand and the investment they have in that and all the money it brings back. It's no different than any, restaurant chain which gets a bad name about one of their biggest selling sandwiches. They're going to do everything they can to protect that image so it doesn't get knocked. That's just the way it goes. And it's unfortunate that money usually rules. We'll get back with our reviews of Menudo next. Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The K. Mike the Intern, Jay Stevens back in the studio one more time. It is Dark Side of the Stream. We discussed Menudo, Forever Young on HBO Max. So how many Menudo dolls would you give this?
I'm kind of bummed that we're too old to be in the Menudo band. I feel like you and I would be great members.
At the time, I would have been too young. You would have been too old. So we just missed it. Just going in a different direction.
We missed the gap.
There was no way in hell my parents would have signed off on, because I don't care how much money you were going to give my mom. There's no way in hell she would give up her rights to her children.
I have a buddy who was in a boy band. He was in O-Town, and the same thing. He would tell me stories of them getting ripped off. They had zero money to their name.
Well, because again, it's not it's all in the sell. Like, you can see the potential. You get it as cheap as you possibly can, and then you charge as much as you can. Those kids are just driving around, getting experiences,
and you're having a great
time. To shows, don't have to go to school.
When the tour's over, you don't have no money, but you had a great time, a great story to tell.
For millions of people, and I don't have any money. How is that possible?
I think that's exactly the case.
And that's why you see so many different independent groups and artists and stuff trying to make it on TikTok and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram right now, is because they are saying that they can make more money that way.
Yeah, it's working.
Same thing with teachers that have got OnlyFans accounts. You should be paying your teachers a living salary so they don't have to do porn on the side to make a living. How about that?
That lady made a lot of money too.
Dude, $1 million in a year?
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying? Like, that's the thing. But why are they in the position in the first place? That's the thing.
See? That's what we do, Mike.
If we've come back to this OnlyFans,
go to our boss and say,
we've come back to this OnlyFans.
We don't make enough money.
We're going to start an OnlyFans.
We're going to start our OnlyFans page,
and it's going to be two guys.
You think we'll get a raise?
What if can we do a double? Can you have a two for OnlyFans account?
Yeah,
2 for 1.
I bet we'd make great money. I thought this was our OnlyFans.
It is now. Either way, I
give it 2 Menudo dolls just because I had no subtitles and I couldn't understand half the documentary.
I'd stay probably about 3. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. I could have gone the rest of my life not knowing about the story. But again, always want to.
We can't pick winners every week.
No, and it wasn't.
That's why we do this.
It wasn't a bad thing. I was just like, okay. That's really sucks, and it really sucks for you, and you don't really get the male perspective in that situation. So I get it, but also, it is what it is. Next documentary we're going to do is a 4-parter. It's on Netflix. It's called "Till Murder Do Us Part." And real excited to watch this one and get back to our roots and talk about love and murder. As always, you can stream these shows live on Facebook or YouTube, 9 a.m. on Thursdays. Download them as a free podcast on our 104.7 The Cave app. We're just listening to it during my show, 9 a.m., or Jay's show during the 6 p.m. hour on Thursdays. I am Mike the Intern. That's Jay Stevens reminding you we watch movies
documentaries
so you don't have to. It's Dark Side of the Stream on 104.7 The Cave.
Follow our OnlyFans.